correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're also seeing a shift in the way these movies, the way the Oscar movies are being rolled out. Because in the past, again, you take it to Toronto or Telluride and hope the critics supported it. Now you're kind of seeing things like the new Jason Reitman film has been screening in.
He's doing pop-up screenings.
Yeah, I mean, so they're and taking it straight to the audience. I think the premiere was in Minneapolis.
So much as it was a premiere, it wasn't even like a quote-unquote real premiere. It was just like, okay, here's the screening, and we're going to tell people like moments before it happens, and here it is.
And not let the critics be the first voice on that.
Let the audience be the first voice. And it was Minnesota, Chicago, Austin. I think that's what they did.
Mm-hmm.
And and they completely skipped the festival circuit, and then they'll have their normal premiere like a few days before
when it opens.
Yeah. But yeah, exactly. So, but that is what they're doing that specifically because they want the audience to feel like they're discovering something. Because that's another problem too, is that there's that sense of we're all so hyper aware of the media now. We all know that we all have a voice. We all know that there's no gatekeeper of that anymore. But there's also that loss of the sense of discovery when we couldn't communicate quite as well. And you would all of a sudden hear about a movie that was sort of trickling down in the world. And now everybody can know everything. And so by choosing to do young adult, the Reitman movie that way, they're forcing discovery, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's a savvy strategy. Do you think there are still, you mentioned before, Amy Taubin when she championed Kevin Smith.
Yeah, with Clerks, yeah.
Do you think that anybody has the power to still do that, to sort of be the star maker?
It's a good question because again, in kind of the discovery mode, Clerks screened for the first time at the IFFM, which doesn't even exist anymore, which was this kind of funky thing in New York that's now become Film Week in New York. But back then was like when independent film was still kind of starting out. They thought, hey, wouldn't it be great if we just let everybody who would pay $450 for a submission have a chance to screen their film? And when Clerks came out in whatever year that was, 91, 92, that was still a okay idea because there weren't that many films. It quickly became so many films and so many bad films that they got rid of that. But even so, he screened for like 3 people in that audience. And one of them was Bob Hawke, and who was a guy who finds films, and he still does film consultation. He was the one who told Amy. Amy was the one who wrote about it in the Village Voice and started his career. And that kind of discovery, I think, it can happen. In fact, I was just reading today, there is a short filmmaker who did, it's an animated short that is just getting a ton of attention right now, and it's screened in the Toronto After Dark section of the Toronto Film Festival, a couple other places. But all of a sudden, it hit the internet, and now it's taking off. And it's like he's got agents and producers crawling all over him. There's people who want to make a feature version of it. So discovery can still happen, but it happens
more democratically.
More democratically, and also I think a lot more quickly. I mean, it was just like because when the whole kind of trajectory for Clerks, it was sort of a slow burn, and it was only when, Bob called Kevin, and then Bob called Amy, and it just kind of started the whole developing thing. It's nowadays it can happen like that.
Yeah.
And because of something, if you put it on the internet, if it's something that's interesting, people will let you know really, really quickly. So yeah, right. I think it can happen, but it's going to happen in a much different way.
Yeah, no, and I think that applies probably tenfold to the music industry, which is so fractured now. And you say, I was thinking, I read this interview with Marilyn Robinson, the novelist, a few weeks ago, and she basically says the Times critic at the time, she owes her I'm sorry about that. Owes her career to him, and that doesn't exist anymore. Now you would owe your career to a bunch of people on Amazon.com who rallied around your book and wrote 5-star reviews.
In fact, in terms of the distributors, they worry about the aggregate critical voice more than they do any individual critical voice, with the exception of the New York Times. The New York Times still has enough sway to really cause a panic if you don't get a good review. But specifically for New York, because so many of these independent films will screen, sometimes they only screen in New York, although certainly that's their first city, and that's what defines what happens to it afterward. And it's becoming less so, but it's like that can still put fear in a distributor's heart, is when they get a bad New York Times review. Everything else is like, okay, it all kind of folds in, and we'll consider the Rotten Tomato voice, but it's Manohla Dargis can still frighten a lot of people.
I wonder if that will change within a couple of years too.
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it will too. It just there's no way that it won't.
Right. Let's open up for a few questions because we have to. Yeah, go ahead.
What's your background? How'd you get into this?
Well, I graduated from Southwest High School, and then this is I'm going to give you the whole thing, and I'll do it quickly, but you'll see why in a second because it's a very weird background. Austin College, graduated. My first job was at Tandy, working for the advertising department when they had one. And I did copywriting, which was incredibly boring. And I went to Burlington Northern Railroad, where I worked in corporate communications, where I had to wear pantyhose every day, and I loathed it. And so, and 100 degrees, it's like, what is wrong with these people? And so literally I quit to become a prep cook. I really hated all of that stuff, and I loved cooking, and I quit to become a prep cook at Whole Foods in Dallas. And then I became a line cook, and then I became a line cook at another restaurant in Deep Ellum, and then I became the sous chef at that restaurant. And then I realized that becoming there's no reason in the world to work in a restaurant unless you want to own one, because otherwise you're slave labor, and you've got to be really crazy to want to own a restaurant, and I'm not that crazy. So there was an opening for the Dallas Observer they had just started a food column. I was the restaurant critic there for Dish. And I went from there to Fine Cooking and was an editor there. And then I just got bored writing about food. I just thought it wasn't complicated enough. And the whole indie film thing had started, with a lot of this world that we're talking about. And I got fortunate that the very first interview I ever did, I just did as a freelance article just so I could start figuring out how to write about film, was with John Pearson, who is now a professor at UT. And he was the powerhouse behind Clerks and She's Gotta Have It and Go Fish and lots and lots of films. And his wife Janet is now the head of South by Southwest. But John and Janet were my first interview in 1995 because I lived in Connecticut and they lived in Cold Spring, New York. I was very lucky. Went to Sundance for the first 2 times by myself on my own dime. Again, just looking for ways to find a way to cover film. I did freelance articles for Filmmaker and for The Independent, and then my editor at The Independent asked me to be her managing editor, and so I moved to New York for a year, and then I got an offer from The Hollywood Reporter to come to LA, and my best friend lived in LA. She graduated from Pascal. And I said okay, and so I was in Hollywood Reporter for 2 years, and then I went to Variety, and I was at Variety for 11 years, and I was as a reporter, editor, created sections, doing business development, and now I'm editor-in-chief and general manager at IndieWire. So I give that whole kind of spiel because it's not any kind of direct route. It's not like, oh, I went to college and I went to a J school and then I was an intern for a film, department. It wasn't like that at all. And I think that for anybody who wants to go into journalism, again, check your head, because journalism is a really tricky business right now. And there is no such thing, I don't think, anymore of somebody who's just a journalist. I just don't. It's a very risky position to be in, because I know things about tech development, I know things about editing, I know things about revenue and business and all that sort of thing, and that is my job security, such as it is. So that's my...
Yeah, everything Dana said is true, but the one optimistic note of that is I find that when we get young kids into the paper, and young kids at our newspaper means anyone under 35, when we have younger folks coming in, they know so much that the old guard doesn't know about technology.
Oh, absolutely.
About communication. So if you have kids, who are interested in journalism, like there's actually, I think, going to be a tremendous amount of opportunity.
There is, but at the same time, I think it's, because I think J schools have the same problem as film schools, is that they don't, there's this purity to it, like it's some kind of higher calling, and that you don't want to complicate it with that stuff, and that is nonsense.
Yeah.
that is complete nonsense. You have got to complicate it. You have got to protect yourself and not
But
just.
but that's not just film schools and J schools. That's newspapers and film studios.
Absolutely, it is. But it's just, but it because it's like that. But that is the thing you have to kind of fight against, and that's
Yeah.
actually the thing I think is valuable, or wound up being, I can't say it was intentional on my part at all, but about my funky career path is that I just kind of figured out what I needed to know when I needed to know it, not because I was trying to fulfill a certain path and thinking, well, I don't need to know that. That's not on, that's not on the checklist. And you just figure out whatever you need to figure out as you go.
I think it's still a possible path too. It's just
it's a more complicated one.
It's more it's more sort of torturous and complicated.
Yeah, I never thought I was going to have to deal with all this kind of stuff.
Yeah,
you do.
Same here. No, I mean we're any writer now is also editing, is also blogging, is also posting photo galleries. I mean, there's a whole different set of skills, but there's still the opportunity to do good writing.
Absolutely, and it's like, but it's coming in different places in different ways too. I mean, it's like, frankly, I'm really grateful that IndieWire, it's 15 years old and it's always been a purely online publication, and I am so grateful for that, because after working in Variety, I don't ever want to work at a place that has to do both again. It is so crazy making, and because you can really only serve one master, and I'd prefer to serve the digital master. It's just trying to do both will just, with all due respect, it just drive me nuts.
Oh, yeah. Often drives me nuts.
How difficult is it to balance the need to sort of keep up with the speed of digital with the thoughtfulness that goes into reviewing and criticism?
That's a good question. I consider myself very lucky in that I'm fast. I'm a fast writer. I always have been a fast writer, so I haven't honestly changed too much. Sometimes I wish I had a little more time to kind of ruminate and play with these sentences or something. But I imagine it's harder for people who are accustomed to traditional print deadlines, where you'd see the movie on Monday or the Thursday before, and your copy's due on Wednesday, and so I don't know. I don't think it's that different, and I'm energized by it. But I think a lot of people probably would say otherwise.
I think what's funny is, like, Eugene Hernandez, who's here for the festival as well, and he's the founder of IndieWire, he's the head of digital strategy for Film Society at Lincoln Center. He's basically had to deal with bringing the Film Society into the 21st century. That's why he was hired, is to bring in that digital sensibility. And one of the things he told me was that Film Comment, which is part of the Film Society, they would go to Cannes, the Film Comment would go to Cannes, and then they wouldn't publish anything about it until the issue that came out in September. And he was like, "No, that can't happen. This is ridiculous. That is
Yeah.
not useful or helpful."
Yeah, no, that's barely acceptable in 1897. Much less now. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but there is a real institutional paralysis, I guess is the word, because people don't want to change. They want to sort of hold on to that old guard, and it was nice back in the old days. It's like I'm sure Pauline Kael felt very powerful and enjoyed that. I was the voice. I could. People will wait for my report from Cannes, and I'll give it to them when they get it. And now that's all been changed. And if you can't roll with those punches, you're not going to last much longer.
I think ADD comes in handy too. I mean, it's and why not? We all have it. But I think it's, for me, it's like, in fact, sometimes I have to slow myself down because after so many years at the trades, I'm very news sensitive. I'm very aware of when something is coming out that we can jump on and react to, and sometimes, but because we have limited resources, you have to be careful about deciding what you're going to jump on. But being fast is absolutely vital, and just presuming that you have to be fast. It's just like having that as just a given, but not seeing it as a solution.
Yeah.
It is something as a skill you have to have, but at the same time, there has to be some part of your brain that also does the analysis around, okay, is this actually going to be worth the trouble to do it, or do I let that go and move on to something else?
Yeah. The other thing I was going to say to add to that is, like, you're prone to make more errors now, but you also can correct them faster.
Exactly.
So
yes.
If I make an error now because I'm writing fast and it went online right away, I'll just go back online and correct
exactly.
it.
And on transparency, I think, is really important too. I mean, it's like I think that's been true for journalism forever, but now especially is that because you can be transparent. To me, you are obliged to be transparent. You can't say, "Oh, I could, it went to press, there's nothing I can do. It's like, of course you can change it. And then it's like, on Twitter, if someone complains and they have a legitimate point, you need to address it.
Yep.
You can't pretend like it's not there.
Are you concerned at all with the quality of criticism at large because of that speed and rushing to judgment? Has it affected it?
So, yes and no. I mean, sometimes I don't think The Tree of Life is a movie that lends itself to having 30 minutes to write about it. But at the same time, the speed is exciting. I mean, the speed is you can you're calling it from the gut, and I like that. I like that. I don't have time to like second guess or wonder if will this opinion be so different from the mainstream opinion, and I think that's good. I think there is too much of that kind of second guessing and what did you think and all.
Yeah, it's because I think it's sort of a weird myth in a way in terms of how much time you really need. I mean, it's like, yes, you need time to craft and all that, but seriously, in terms of, I don't mean just for journalism, I mean for anything. It's like, you think that, oh my God, this must take forever to do this, and actually a lot of times, no. It's just you need concentrated thought. You need to be, focused and thoughtful, but it doesn't necessarily have to be stretched out as long as you think. Yeah. But but thinking fast definitely helps.
Yeah. Last question, because they're wrapping us up.
Do y'all ever think about like writing screenplays or getting involved in the production at all?
No. I've written I published a novel in 2007, and we're trying to sell the second one presently. So I'm more interested in fiction writing, but screenwriting doesn't really interest me very
Actually,
much.
no, that was something I forgot in the whole how did I get here thing. That was the other thing I did, is I made a short film. But it was really with the purpose of I need to figure out what these people are talking about, because I wasn't that I had this great ambition to be a filmmaker. I just did it so I can understand something about the process, hands-on. And I'd worked as a PA on a film shoot in New York, and it is just like, and that was like, as artistically, not so meaningful, but in terms of just understanding, for me, because I'm all about information. I need to understand what I'm trying to do, just so as I'm moving toward a goal, it was invaluable.
I similarly took a number of production courses in college, and knowing the technicals of this stuff is valuable just in informing your writing and your criticism and knowing what you're talking about.
But absolutely, it's like that. That's a tough career, man. Trying to be a screener.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dana, for doing this.
Oh, thank you, Christopher.
And thank you guys for coming. I think they're doing the T-Bone Burnett is going to be interviewed by my colleague Preston Jones, which should be interesting, and that's at 2:30. And there's tons of good movies today and tomorrow. What should they see?
Oh gosh, I don't remember what's on the schedule for today.
I'm going to go see Shame because I haven't seen that. That's later tonight.
I want to see Shame. I haven't seen it yet, but I want to watch Fort Worth. Watch Shame.
We'll see how many people run in
That'll
terror.
be interesting.
And I'm a big fan of Pariah, which is screening tomorrow night. Make sure to check that out. So thank you, guys.